I never went looking for secrets. But when I saw my wife's journal open on the kitchen counter with 3 words that shattered everything, no more him, I realized I wasn't part of her future. So I began quietly rewriting my role in her story. Saturday mornings were usually quiet. I'd wake early, get the kettle going, and sketch out a grocery list while listening to a podcast. That's what I was doing when I saw the journal. It wasn't hidden, just lying face down on the kitchen counter, flipped open to a page that caught the light. The title at the top was in my wife's usual block letters, Goals 2025. I wasn't looking for anything. I'm not the kind of man who snoops through drawers or checks her phone. But this wasn't tucked away. It was right where I set my coffee every morning. So I glanced. That's all. Like noticing something through your neighbor's window and then trying to pretend you didn't. Most of the list was ordinary. Read more books, take a photography class, run a half marathon, visit the coast. Half the lines had stars beside them, her way of adding momentum, like asterisks could force commitment. And then I saw it. 3 words at the very top. No flourish, no context. Just, no more him. Not my name. Just him. The words stopped everything. I didn't move. The kettle clicked off, but I didn't hear it. My chest tightened, but not with anger. It felt like pressure leaving a sealed space, like air getting thinner by the second. I'm an engineer. I'm trained to distinguish signal from noise. The sentence was the signal. Everything else, my assumptions, my hopes, the small daily routines, suddenly became background interference. I didn't touch the journal. I didn't slam it shut or tear the page. I simply pulled out my phone and took one photo. No zoom, no framing, just proof. Then I set it back exactly as I'd found it, turned the kettle back on, and poured coffee like nothing had happened. She came downstairs a few minutes later, humming to herself, chatting about her day, flipping through her phone. She saw the journal, didn't flinch, didn't move it. Just poured herself coffee and asked if I had plans. I said I might go to the hardware store and out of habit added, "Wanna come?" She smiled and said she had Pilates and maybe brunch with the girls. That phrase, the girls, had started appearing more often lately, especially when timelines didn't make sense. When names might invite follow-up questions, it had become a placeholder, a buffer. She left. The journal stayed open on the counter, still showing that sentence. I placed a coaster beneath it so the coffee ring wouldn't spread further. Not because I cared about the book, but because something about preserving that moment felt necessary, like maintaining the integrity of evidence. I spent the rest of the morning in the garage, fixing an old sander I'd been meaning to get to, taking it apart, lining up the screws, labeling parts. It gave my hands something to do while my mind calibrated. I wasn't plotting revenge. I wasn't even sure I felt betrayed. What I felt was replacement, like someone had quietly swapped me out of my own life. That's when I started making my own list. Not reactions, just small, clear tasks. I called it quiet tasks. Back up tax files, change the emergency contact at work, move the car title to the safe. Nothing drastic, just preparation. Her text came around noon. "How's your day?" I replied like always. Short, polite, with a mild joke about fixing the sander. She responded with a selfie. 2 mimosas on a table, her face half in frame, captioned, "Refuel." I didn't ask who the other glass belonged to. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, I turned the journal upright to read the rest of the list. Below "No More Him" were things like "Say Yes More," "New Headshot," and "Boundaries," with a question mark dangling at the end. But there was no mention of me. No reference to a plan, a conversation, or even guilt. Just the declaration, a decision already made. She got home that evening with shopping bags and stories about her day. Said the new instructor was amazing, asked if I'd carry in a case of bottled water. I did because I still carry weight when it's handed to me. That night we watched a show we used to enjoy. She scrolled through her phone, pretending not to. I laughed at a joke the writers had actually nailed, and she looked surprised, like she thought the old me had already left the building. When she went to brush her teeth, I opened the nightstand drawer, removed my wallet, and quietly moved the spare key from the communal bowl to my private drawer. A simple shift, No drama, but meaningful. That was the moment I realized she'd regret leaving that journal open. Maybe not now, maybe not next week, but eventually, because the year had already started keeping score, and I had just started reading the rules. The week after I read her journal felt colder, but not because of the Denver weather. She called it a busy stretch. That's the kind of phrase that works when you don't live in the same house. Monday started with a business outfit I hadn't seen in a year, paired with perfume reserved for anniversaries. She mentioned a networking breakfast downtown. I nodded, said, "Have a good one," and bit down on a reply I knew she wouldn't want. Engineers learn to detect vibration before a system fails. You can hear it if you stop pretending everything's fine. That week, her phone lived face down. Her texts came slower. She suggested eating at the kitchen counter so she could scroll while pretending to chew. I set 2 plates at the table anyway. She brought hers to the counter. Tuesday, she came home late with a subtle glow, one that doesn't come from Pilates or cold air. When I asked about her day, she picked a fight about the thermostat, said I always set it too low. That number hasn't changed in 3 winters. I offered to raise it 2 degrees. She didn't know what to do with that. The argument fell apart mid-sentence. She took a long shower and left footprints all the way to bed. I added a note to my quiet task list: stop explaining. Wednesday, she said she was grabbing drinks with the girls after Pilates. She dropped an address that didn't match any gym or brunch spot she'd ever mentioned. When I asked which girls, she waved her hand like the names didn't matter. I nodded. And that night at 10:40, my phone buzzed with an alert from the smart lock. At 12:13, I heard the front door open, heels come off. She slid into bed without saying a word. I stayed still, eyes on the ceiling, measuring silence. Thursday morning, she took a shot at my work, said my meticulous tool wall was cute, asked if I ever got bored fixing other people's problems. I said sometimes, that's all. I didn't rise to the bait. If she was trying to provoke emotion, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. You don't argue with someone who's already rehearsing the next line. Friday, she sent me a photo of an acai bowl with 4 hands in the frame, none of them mine. The caption said, "Fuel." I replied with a thumbs up and a reminder about the furnace check I'd scheduled. She didn't answer. By Saturday, she brought up a ski weekend with the girls again. Said they were shopping for jackets. I was under the car, rotating the tires. She leaned in and said, "Do you ever feel like we're stuck?" I rolled out and looked up at her. "Do you?" I asked. She blinked. Didn't expect that. "I just want to feel alive," she said. I waited a beat before asking, "What does that mean, specifically?" She accused me of interrogating her and walked back inside. Sunday, we had brunch with friends. She answered for both of us when people asked about plans. Said we were keeping things flexible. She glanced at me like it was an inside joke. I smiled, but only with my mouth. On the way home, I drove. She scrolled. Her thumb never stopped moving. I asked, "Is there someone else?" She didn't flinch, just laughed, too fast, too loud, and said, "You're paranoid." That word again. Control. She added, "This is what I mean. You're trying to control everything." I nodded. Let the accusation hang. Let her think whatever made her comfortable. That week, the pressure moved into smaller rooms. She began narrating my moods. "You're quiet," she said, "so you must be mad." I told her no, I was listening. "To what?" she snapped. "To see if there's anything worth hearing." I stopped offering weekend plans. I stopped sending check-in texts. I stopped solving problems that weren't mine. My silence became a boundary, not a punishment. At dinner, her phone lit up with a message from someone saved under initials I didn't recognize. She angled it away, face down. Said, "Just work." I nodded. Didn't ask. You don't need a confrontation when the evidence walks itself through the front door. She started locking the bathroom door. She wore a new lipstick she never wore around me. She talked about a client off-site like it was a vacation. I started taking photos of our garage inventory, serial numbers of shared electronics. I exported the shared calendar and began updating passwords on accounts she never remembered anyway. We still had small good moments. A laugh at an ad, a shared cup of coffee, her head on my shoulder during a movie she didn't finish. But they felt like snow landing on warm pavement. They vanished before you could register the beauty. She came home one night with a new kind of confidence, a look she hadn't worn in months. She studied me like I was a statue that had moved an inch. "You're different," she said. I took a breath. "I'm done debating what I can see." She waited for me to list the proof. I didn't. Let her wonder which breadcrumb had given her away. When she finally said it, "Maybe we need space," I nodded. "Take what you need." That response threw her. She expected a fight. But control requires resistance. I'd stopped giving her any. That night she packed a bag, said she needed time to think, left in the same blazer she wore to that networking breakfast. I watched the door close and sat down at the table, opened my quiet tasks list and added 2 words: begin exit. The game was already over. She just hadn't realized the scoreboard changed. She was gone for 3 nights. No check-ins, no excuses, just absence disguised as space. I didn't chase her. I didn't call. I used the time. I pulled 2 suitcases from the closet and opened the flattened boxes I'd kept from our last move. Quiet, efficient work. I started in the office. Tools, files, backups. Then the garage. I labeled each box clearly, left anything messy behind. If she needed to make a scene later, she could do it without me in the picture. On the 3rd night, I found a dining reservation on the shared iPad. 2 seats downtown for our anniversary. Her name was on it. I hadn't booked anything. The restaurant was one we'd saved for special occasions. Promotions, birthdays, not casual dinners, not girls' nights. I didn't say a word. At midnight, I drove to the storage unit I'd toured months ago, when cracks first appeared. The manager remembered me, probably because I'd asked detailed questions about security and climate control. Engineers think ahead. Unit 143. I unlocked the door, slid in the first load, and took a breath. It didn't feel like leaving. It felt like removing myself from a problem I wasn't causing. Back home, I placed my wedding ring in the tray by the front door. No ceremony, no drama, just clarity. Then I took another photo of the journal. Same page, same words, same date. No more him. I spent the night in the guest room. In the morning, I began the formal side of my withdrawal. Bank accounts. I left enough in the joint account to cover bills for 3 months, then moved the rest to my private account. I changed streaming passwords, closed shared shopping profiles, updated contact info at work, adjusted my paycheck routing. I called a lawyer a coworker had once mentioned, a calm man with 3 kids and no wasted words. We didn't talk about war, just structure, documentation, process. When her text arrived mid-morning, happy anniversary. Let's do something this weekend instead. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. The iPad had already shown me where her weekend was going. Instead, I posted a single image. Not a threat, not a rant, just a photo. Her journal, cropped to the sentence, date included. I didn't name her, didn't tag anyone. Just let the truth stand. Caption, resolution completed. The audience was small. Family, close friends, people who mattered in real life. People who'd seen our relationship from the inside. I turned my phone face down and left it that way. She came home early, keys fumbling in the lock, her voice sharp before she'd even crossed the threshold. "What is that post?" I was at the kitchen table, reviewing a spreadsheet titled Household Budget, Post-Separation. I didn't close the laptop. I said, "A line you wrote." She looked at the journal, the ring tray, the boxes. You could see it all land at once. "You're humiliating me," she said. "I didn't mention you," I replied. "You recognized yourself." She teared up, said we could start fresh, asked if we could forget this week. I handed her a tissue box without a word. She asked where my things were. "Out of your way," I said. That afternoon, I emailed a short message to both sets of parents. "We're taking space. Please give us room to handle logistics. We're safe." My mother called. I let it go to voicemail. Texted back, "We'll talk tonight. I'm okay." At 3 p.m., the locksmith arrived. He changed the lock on my office and the garage side door. I paid in cash, tipped well. Before dinner, I moved another load to storage. On the way back, I stopped by a park and watched kids sliding down a half-frozen hill. The kind of place we used to talk about taking our own future children. The thought didn't sting. It just passed. When I walked in, she was sitting on the stairs trying to look casual. "We can fix this," she said. I set my keys in the tray next to the ring and responded quietly, I already did my fixing. She searched my face for warmth, found none. Not because I was angry, but because I was finished. By nightfall, the house had shifted. Her side of the closet was still full. Mine was just empty hangers. My new key worked. The guest room door clicked shut with clean precision. The next morning, she texted again. "Can we talk about logistics?" I responded with an attachment. The timeline, the move-out plan, utilities split, items listed by category, dates marked in clear columns, no emotion, just structure. I didn't open the front door right away. She stood outside longer than necessary. When I finally stepped out, she looked relieved. I kept the space between us. "You won," she said, trying to frame it as a game. I shook my head. "We finished." She flinched. Not because I was cruel, but because the silence gave her nothing to work with. "I made a mistake," she said. The words were shaped like regret, but lacked weight. I pointed to her phone, where my email sat unread. "Everything we need to settle this is there." She tried to pull me back into memory, asked about our first apartment, our plans. "I remember," I said. "That's why I won't keep paying for this one." She stopped pretending. "He blocked me," she said suddenly, chin high. "The guy. He cut me off." It should have hurt. It didn't. It explained everything. She wasn't fighting for us. She was scrambling for structure now that her backup plan disappeared. "I'm sorry," she added. I nodded once. "But not here," I said. "Not with me." She followed me down the stairs asking where I was going, if I'd text when I got there, if we could talk to a counselor. "No," I said. "Email only." Outside, the sun was bright, but the air stayed cold. She stood in the driveway as I loaded the car. My phone buzzed. A new message from her father. "Paperwork for the boutique is off. I'll help with movers Tuesday." I replied, "Thank you." Then I drove to the storage unit, unloaded the last few items, and closed the door behind me. That chapter was over. The next one would start with a clean floor, an honest lease, and no need to double-check whose life I was building. The morning after my post, the house felt quiet, but not because she wasn't talking. It was the kind of quiet that follows impact, the kind where people stop pretending. Her phone lit up nonstop. Short calls, longer calls, voicemails she didn't finish before deleting. I didn't ask what they said. I didn't need to. I made coffee, sent my lawyer a clean inventory list, and changed the furnace filter. Simple things. Order, even in chaos. Around noon, her best friend texted me, a long paragraph about private matters and public respect. I replied with 6 words. Her handwriting, her date, no names. 10 minutes later, the same friend sent another message. I told her to apologize. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in noise, only signal. Then came the family round. My mother called to offer support masked as prayer. My dad asked clear questions, ones that showed he understood I'd already made decisions. Then her father called. He asked me to meet him at his office. I agreed. When I arrived, he wasn't angry, just disappointed in his daughter. He pointed at a set of blueprints, didn't ask me to sit, said he'd seen the post and the photo, asked if there was more. "There's less than people assume," I said. That was enough. He nodded and told me he was backing out of co-signing the lease on her boutique. "Not until she learns to say something and stand in it," he said. I didn't reply. We both knew there was nothing more to discuss. The ripple effect hit quickly. The friends who once fueled her nights started messaging me like they were approaching a witness they'd misunderstood. "We didn't know it was that bad. We thought you were just being distant." Sorry for my part. I left those messages unread. Then came work. A woman I didn't know sent a message from a blank account. Just one line. "Thank you for posting." The account vanished an hour later. It didn't matter. The point had been made. She came home on Thursday and didn't say a word. Just dropped her bag and went to her room. By Friday, she stopped trying to look busy. The silence from her circle must have started to sting. On Saturday afternoon, she barged into my office while I was finishing a project plan. 2 team members were nearby. She held up her phone like it was a weapon. "Take that down," she said. I looked at her steady. "You wrote it." She paused for a full second. Her face changed. The performance slipped. She glanced at my coworkers. Tried a new tone. "We can fix this privately," she said. "We are," I answered, motioning to the door. She left without another word. That night, the messages started again. Anger, confusion, then softness. A photo from our first vacation, a memory offered like a favor. Can we talk like adults? I replied once. Email logistics only. Lease, utilities, move-out dates. I'll respond in 24 hours. The next night, she tried a different angle. Appearance, makeup, dress, the one that always drew attention. She knocked, leaned into the doorway and asked, "Can I come in?" "We're not doing that," I said. She stepped back. "We're still married." I nodded. "That's why." The door closed. The lock slid into place. Her perfume lingered, but it couldn't cover up what she'd already exposed. Sunday night, her public pivot arrived. A gray square, a caption about mental health and miscommunication. No apology, no ownership. The comments weren't kind. A cousin replied, "Own it." A coworker posted, "We're rooting for both of you," then deactivated his account an hour later. By Monday, her father stopped returning her calls. The man with the initials in her phone disappeared from her timeline, replaced by sunrise quotes and recycled mantras. That week, she tried panic. "Rent's due. Can we talk?" We already had. I forwarded her the original spreadsheet, added 2 deadline reminders. She replied with a paragraph about memories. I replied with a sentence about movers. Then she started waiting outside my office. First just footsteps, then a knock, then another. "Please," she whispered through the door. I poured tea, answered vendor emails, logged tool specs. "Night 1, she yelled. "Night 2, she cried. Night 3, she said nothing. That one hurt more. Her mother texted me late. "She's sitting outside. Can you check on her?" I looked through the peephole. There she was, back against the wall, suitcase next to her like she was leaving without leaving. I didn't open the door. I texted her mother, "She's safe. We'll speak at 1 p.m. tomorrow." Then I shut off the hallway light. People started seeing her for who she was, not who she performed. Friends recalculated. Her Pilates studio quietly dropped her from the weekend roster. The girls stopped replying. Even her coworker updated his profile picture to a woman and a dog. Comments off. She tried one last time with me. Sat outside my room, palms up in her lap. Quiet, like she'd finally heard the weight of what she'd said. I brushed my teeth, turned off the lights, set my alarm. The next morning, I got up early, showered, made coffee. Routine keeps you steady. I emailed her at 10 a.m. with a document titled Next Steps. It included asset splits, timelines, utility breakdowns. No emotion, just clarity. Then I opened the door. She stood fast, wiping her face. "You won," she said. I didn't flinch. "We finished." She tried one last play. "He blocked me." I nodded. "Wish fulfilled." I made a mistake. "Maybe," I said, "but not here. Not with me." She reached for the suitcase handle. I didn't stop her. I picked up my own and walked out first. Somewhere the echo of her decision had returned. Now she was left to live in it. I didn't look back as I drove to the new place. It was a temporary loft, month to month, concrete floors, nothing fancy. A friend from work had mentioned it months ago. At the time, I'd dismissed the idea. Now it felt right. I dropped my bag, opened the windows, and let the quiet settle. Then I built a small table I'd picked up on the way, set my laptop on it, answered 2 work emails. That was enough for day 1. At 2 p.m., her email came in. The subject line read, "Logistics confirmation." Inside, a clean itemized list, dates, belongings, a forwarding address. She acknowledged the financial breakdown, signed off on utilities, and proposed a final move-out date. It was straightforward. For once, there was no emotion between the lines. I replied with brief confirmations. At the bottom, I added one final line. "We'll handle any remaining communication through lawyers." 5 minutes later, her reply landed. Understood. Sometimes respect comes back not as warmth, but as compliance. And for where we were, that was enough. Messages from friends came in waves that afternoon. Some wanted updates. Others wanted the whole story. I answered only a few, people who had earned a place in the truth. To the rest, I sent 3 words. All settled now. I wasn't interested in retelling the damage. It wasn't a badge. It was just over. Her final message of the night came around 9 p.m. One line. Thank you for not making this uglier. I stared at it for a minute. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't a performance either. It was the most honest thing she'd said in weeks. I didn't reply. Gratitude, like closure, isn't always a two-way exchange. I cooked a simple dinner and ate at the table. No distractions, no background noise. Just one meal, finished in peace. The kind of meal that tells you you're no longer a supporting character in someone else's mess. The next morning I went back to my list, the one I started that first day after finding the journal. I checked off the final item. Emergency contact updated. Brother now, not spouse. The field was complete. That felt like real closure. A few days later, I returned to the storage unit for the last time. I double-checked everything, signed off on a transfer for the remaining items she'd claimed in the document. Movers would handle it. I left a copy of the signed agreement on the inside of the door. No messages, just facts. At noon, I met her father for coffee. He didn't ask for explanations, just nodded and said, "You handled this clean." I said thank you. He handed me an envelope with receipts from the boutique's canceled lease. "She's starting over," he said, "this time without safety nets." I nodded once and left. Back at the loft, I unpacked my books. Tools next. Then the small plant my sister insisted I bring, even though I'd never kept one alive. I placed it on the table next to the laptop. Routine returned slowly. Work stabilized. My team noticed the change in energy. One quietly said, "You seem lighter." I nodded. That was true. The social post I'd made, the one photo of the journal page, continued circulating quietly among those who needed to see it. No updates, no commentary, just the original evidence, standing on its own. She never asked for it to be deleted again. Eventually, her name stopped showing up in my notifications. The girls fell silent. The coworker disappeared. Even the sunrise quotes vanished from her feed. I didn't search for new connections. I wasn't ready. I didn't want distraction. I wanted stillness. Real stillness, not the version people fake when they're waiting for something better to come along. One night I got a text from her number. It just said, "I hope you're okay." I read it, then I deleted it. She'd had months to ask that when it mattered. Respect isn't earned through regret. It's earned through action. She had written, "No more him." I fulfilled that wish completely, not out of spite, not to prove a point, but because someone's decision should carry the weight it deserves. She created the boundary, I honored it, and now the silence belongs to me. If she ever reaches out again, it will be filtered through lawyers. If I hear she's moved away, I'll wish her stability and keep walking. The pain had already run its course. What remained was peace, not from forgetting, but from acting with clarity. People asked later how I stayed so calm. I told them I'm a builder, and when something fails, you either reinforce it or you remove the faulty part and rebuild from the foundation up. In this case, removal was the only option. So I rebuilt, alone, on solid ground, and that made all the difference.